There are three positioning modes or schemes in CSS: normal, float, and absolute. Each has its own set of rules, and every box will be positioned using one of these schemes. Different boxes will use different schemes depending on their position and their float style settings. So in this movie, let me review these three positioning schemes, starting with normal flow. Normal flow is the default scheme used for positioning. It applies to any element that does not have a positioning scheme already specified. In normal flow, block boxes are positioned on a page one after the other and in the order they're written in the HTML code. They start in the upper left of the containing box and stack from top to bottom. The distance between each box is defined by the margins of the box, with top and bottom margins collapsing into one another. For example, I have this document here, normal_flow.html. I have a set of three div tags, which are block elements, remember. Each will be placed below the previous block element, since this is a normal flow. Each left outer edge will touch the left edge of the container block. In this case, this is the browser window itself. Notice that my divs are left justified. This one is a little bit different right here. It's popping out a little bit because I've set a margin of 15, so you can't see the margin there, but notice if I reduce the margin to 5, this comes in a little bit, and if I eliminate it altogether, the left edge of the border will match the others. But in terms of the box definition, all are scooted over there flush left with the browser, and they're stacked in order that I've written the HTML here in the document. So this document is up on the top because that div tag was written first in the code. So to summarize, in the normal flow scheme, block boxes flow vertically starting at the top of their containing block, with each placed directly below the preceding one. With inline boxes in a normal flow, they will flow horizontally from left to right. We now come to the float scheme. A float scheme shifts a box left or right on the current line. A floating box will have content that may flow along its side or be prohibited from doing so by the clear property. More about clearing floats later. Content flows down the right side of a left floated box and down the left side of a right floated box. Here I have an image that's behaving as a box. I've right floated it, and I have content to the left. Now, in contrast to normal flow, this image content is actually before the text content. Right here, notice that there is my tag for the image. Here is my text. It's after it, yet the text is before it in the actual rendering of the browser because I've set up a float. There's my float right. I've redefined the image tag right there, setting it to float right. If I set the float to left, notice that everything will switch positions. Now I'm floating it over to the left. The content is going to be over there flowing to the right side. Now a floated box will be shifted to the right or to the left until its outer edge touches the containing block edge or the outer edge of another float. In this case, it's going to go all the way to the left edge of the browser. But if I had another containing box here, it would float all the way to the edge of that containing box, either to the right or to the left. Here's another example. I have three div tags. The gray one is the container div tag, and then two others with a left float and a right float. Now, if there's not enough horizontal room for the float, it'll be shifted downward until either it fits or there are no more floats present. So if I take the dimensions of my container div, that's the gray one, and I change its width from 700 pixels to 600 pixels, you'll notice that there won't be enough room, so my other div tags have to shift downward to fit. Now, since the float is not in the flow of the rest of the page content, non-positioned block boxes created before and after the float will flow vertically as if the float did not exist. However, line boxes created next to the float are shortened to make room for the margin box of the float. Here's another example. In this document, the containing block is too narrow to contain the content next to the float, so the content gets moved to below the floats where it's aligned in the line box according to the text align property. So I have a block of text here. I've set up my styling for the paragraph tag with a width of 10 ems, border solid. I've set up a span here with a float left, width 5 ems, height 5 ems, and border solid blue. Next we come to the absolute positioning scheme. In the absolute positioning scheme, a box is explicitly offset with respect to its containing block. It's removed from the normal flow entirely and has no impact on elements that come before or after it. Notice, for example, here I have 3 boxes. The green box is actually first in the browser, but it's written up here, it's coded last of my 3 div tags. It's the last there. So the position here on the page has nothing to do with the order in which the code was added to the page. Also, an absolutely positioned box establishes a new containing block for normal flow, so content in the block has normal flow attached to it. However, the contents of an absolutely positioned element do not flow around any other boxes. Again, the content in each one is independent. Absolutely positioned boxes may also obscure the contents of other boxes or be obscured themselves. In this case, these div elements have a z-index value, and the higher the z-index, the higher the stacking order. So the z-index for this yellow box or yellow div tag must be higher than the z-index for the green box. Fixed positioning is a subcategory of absolute positioning. More on fixed positioning later. Now, CSS also has positioning properties that allow you to position an element. There are 4 different positioning properties or methods in CSS: static positioning, fixed positioning, relative positioning, and absolute positioning. More on each of these positioning properties and their relationships to the 3 positioning schemes covered here in upcoming movies.